What's up, guys? Welcome to Dynasty Drip today. I got Andy back on the channel, and we're going to come at you with a Superflex mock draft. It's going to be our channel's 1.0 mock draft, whatever you want to call it. Finally, the rookies are kind of into sleeper. We're learning a little bit about their ADP. I would expect their ADPs to continue to rise up. But Andy, thanks for joining me again, man. Nice to have you back on the channel after a great video last week.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Excited. I haven't done a mock draft since I think we were doing mock drafts before last redraft season. So excited to get back into it and, see where some of the players have moved and see what we can learn and, try some strategies here from the 8th spot, which is looking at the board, probably not my favorite place to be in a super flex startup draft. But,
yeah, it's a funky spot, man. As Andy was saying, we kind of just randomly selected. I'm going to be picking from 4. Andy's going to be picking from 8. If you guys haven't been to the channel before, today's a mock draft video. We also do a bunch of buy, sell, trade videos, stash videos, that kind of stuff. So definitely make sure to check out other videos on the channel if you're looking for some more specific advice. But what I love about mock draft videos is that kind of all of that advice does trickle in. You're just kind of hearing it more at like a real reasoning point while we're kind of doing the mock draft. But let's get it kicked off, man. I think no reason to really wait at this point. So we're going to get this kicked off here on Sleeper Mock Draft. Gotta love the little sleeper noises.
Ding, ding.
So I'm sitting here at 1-4. Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels off the board, 1-1, 1-2. And then Jamar Chase at 1-3, which I guess is a little bit of a surprise from how I would be drafting. But I don't know, Andy. Like, he was the wide receiver 1 last year, and he was such a freak. Like, I get it. You're getting potentially the best wideout.
He's young. He's a freak. Just signed a new contract tied to Joe Burrow for a long time. But I still feel like the value of, especially Lamar Jackson having such great seasons the last, since he won his MVP, especially for fantasy with his rushing upside. Obviously, Burrow with his extension, Hurts just being such a consummate number 2 or 3 in the fantasy ranks. Like, I love some Jamar Chase, but in super flex. But it is 2 flex too, which is something to consider. 2 wide out, 2 flex. You are going to have to start more wide receivers probably as well. So,
correct. Yeah. Just kind of going off what Andy said, we are going to do a double flex here. Looks like I did 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 2 flex. I might have meant to do 3 wide receiver, but we're going to go with it. But kind of after all of that talk, for me, this is an easy pick. It's the guy I would have taken potentially at 1-2 overall anyway, and it's just going to be Lamar Jackson, man. I think Lamar Jackson's too much of a cheat code, and the dude is still plenty young, and I don't really expect him to slow down. He had his best passing season of his career kind of last year, and he's obviously still potentially the best athlete on the field at any given moment.
Yeah, and I love Jaden Daniels, but we hope Jaden Daniels turns into Lamar Jackson, whereas Lamar Jackson is Lamar Jackson. So
yeah, you got to be. I understand going for upside, but also my first 1 to 5 picks, I don't want any stinkers. I just don't. I want 5 good players on my team, and then I can start taking a risk. So, Andy, what are you thinking here? It's an interesting board.
This is right where it gets tough because, all of those guys would be from 1 through 7 would be who I would want here. Brock Bowers being this high makes me a little nervous. I see the value of him being, potentially an elite tight end like Kelsey, how he broke the rookie receiving record. But I think also the format of it being super flex and the extra flex spots pushes him down a bit. I think if it was 1 flex, he'd be more in consideration, but it's also still pretty risky, going after a rookie, even though he looked great. I think he's going to be phenomenal. I don't think it'd be a bad pick to take him. I think the safe pick is Mahomes, but we're going to go a little crazy. I might take the first running back off the board just to see where this winds up. See if I like my team. And I think one of the best things you can do to practice for your drafts is do a bunch of mocks, not necessarily because the ADP is going to be on point because, in a real draft, it gets wild, but just to see if I take a running back early in a super flex, am I going to like my team? Are there going to be any quarterbacks left potentially and be able to pivot? So I'm going to go Bijan here, who He and Gibbs, I have him neck and neck, and we're going to see how it goes.
Yeah, immediately to me, I think kind of what you said is Mahomes was sticking out a little bit just because he was kind of that last QB in that tier. But it's tough. Like Mahomes is such a tough guy right now because like we all know he's potentially the best quarterback, but you know, you can only pick it 32, 31 in the NFL draft for a couple years. And it makes sense why you kind of have to build your team a little differently. But coming back around the bend, Mahomes and Herbert went. Looks like some of these wide receivers went. But how are you liking your choice to go Bijan Robinson?
I mean, I would have loved if Herbert came back to me. You know, we'll see how it goes. It's still early. Definitely looking at this next tier of quarterbacks too. I mean, it's crazy. And this is the risk sometimes of taking rookies. You know, Stroud was a top 5 pick last year, dropped quite a bit after one season. I think still holds value. I think he's still going to be great. But, you know, I think we need somebody at wideout. To me, it's Thomas or Nico Collins. You know, based on me already having a running back, I might see if I can try and turn this team into I want to win year one mode. So I think I'm going to go Nico Collins here. I think he's going to be better the next couple seasons, even though Brian Thomas looks phenomenal and is definitely younger. But we're going to see how it goes. Yeah.
I think in your position, like it's a very specific spot where in a video last year, Andy and I went over some of our favorite tips and tricks when it comes to drafting. It was mostly centered on redraft, but the same can be true for Dynasty, which is know your league mates. So in Andy's position, I totally respect, I think Brian Thomas, Nico Collins, you get the wide receiver. But if you know your league is going to hammer double quarterback on this whole next turn, you may be pressured to take a quarterback, but it depends, right? People really start to draft a lot differently than you would expect now. So, I mean, no way Brian Thomas was making it back to me. That would have been the dream, but I didn't expect it. Genty and Barkley going off the board. I think that's about right. I wouldn't be surprised to see Genty slide up, honestly, probably more into that Puka Nico range up in here, right around that turn. Because once Bijan and Gibbs go, I totally understand in a startup sense, Genty's going to go 3. Like the hype is going to be there. And he's going to go there.
Especially if people like his landing spot. I think he'll probably be there regardless. But, you know, if he goes to a team that has a decent offense, we know he's going to get, you know, pretty much all the touches. I think, his draft stock's just going to move up and up.
So my 3 running backs are off the board. My top 3 running backs that I would even consider taking in the first 2 rounds of a startup draft are gone in Genty, Robinson, and Gibbs. I'm looking at wide receiver here, pulling it up on the screen. And I do like some of these guys. But to me, it looks like one big giant tier of players that I all value about the same. Drake London, Harrison, Ladd, Garrett Wilson, JSN, AJ Brown, Rashee Rice. I mean, I would love to have any of these guys on my team. I really would. But none of them are really standing out to me. And I feel like I'll just take whichever one comes back to me. And if you've ever played a Dynasty League with me, you know I am a QB little whore, dude. I'm a QB slut when it comes to the first 2 rounds. And I'm staring at a guy that I like a lot, and that's going to be Drake May, man. I think he has some upside. I think he has a little rushing upside. And I just like what they're building there in New England. I like Vrabel as a coach. And they're going to finally get him some weapons at some point. Now, it may not be this next year, but he's going to grow into a potential player. And I think just for me, I liked Drake May's tape from last year just a little bit more than Caleb Williams. And that's why I'm going Drake May here at 2-9. And I wouldn't be surprised for Drake May to be going in the second round. I think that's almost a lock pick. So it looks like a bunch of wideouts went. Luckily, not all of the wide receivers went here. So I'm coming back. I'm definitely looking at wide receiver again. Garrett Wilson, JSN, AJ Brown, Rashee Rice. Like I said, those were 4 guys that I was looking at in a tier last round. Trey McBride going at 210. I think that's interesting. Love him with his new contract, obviously. But for me, wide receiver all day. And I think out of this group, if I'm going off my rankings, I do have Garrett Wilson the highest. Now, I have talked about potentially selling Garrett Wilson, But in a startup draft compared to your team, I am going to go off my personal rankings, and I do have Garrett Wilson above JSN and AJ Brown. And that's kind of who I was deciding between. I love Rashee Rice, but I think that's too early with the injury and a possible suspension. I'm just not going to take that risk right there.
Yeah, and this getting a little spicy here. I was really hoping to get a Jordan Love, would have been huge for me. Bo Nix, I think I would have been pretty happy with. No quarterbacks here. Kyler's still available. He's still only 27. Another year in the system with Harrison Jr. So hopefully he had a pretty decent year last year. It looks like here he finished quarterback 10, but wasn't like superstar that some people predicted, or maybe that was rankings quarterback 10. I feel like he didn't finish that high. That's projection. Yeah. Where was he? No, 10th. Okay. Yeah. So it was. So, at this point, I feel like I do need to start adding some quarterbacks because looking down, I think there's kind of a pretty significant teardrop. Some really interesting young guys and then some older veterans like Baker and Trevor. So I think I'm going Kyler Murray in a super flex. Even if especially not going quarterback early, at some point you got to pull the trigger. You don't want to be left with absolutely nobody. He's got rushing upside. I like his weapons. So let's see if we can get it done.
And yeah, just kind of like you said, I personally, I would have gone QB there. I love AJ Brown and JSN, but I think I would be scared. And this frees you up to at least have a little freedom for your next two picks. I think by at least getting that one quarterback.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm thinking I might double up. I really like Rashee Rice. Haven't watched a lot of Tet tape, or I just know, he's projected really early in rookie drafts. People really like him. It was great for me and great for us in our NCAA 25 when we played. Absolute stud, if that counts for anything.
It does. It does get weighed heavily in my mind. But like you said, rookie and startup drafts before the NFL draft are tough. You got to be careful and you need to temper your expectations. This is an experiment, but if I was doing a real thing, I would be very hesitant to not draft absolute lock rookies and be a little scared without knowing draft capital.
Yeah. And, I don't know if he's absolute lock rookie, but I think I am going to go with a rookie here. I'm going to take my second quarterback. I'm going to go Cam Ward. Love his rushing upside, probably going number one. Hopefully he can have a season close to like what Jaden Daniels has. Love that he can get it done a little bit with his feet. Also got a cannon of an arm. So, out of the guys here, like, even though I'm trying to win, early, I think out of Brock Purdy, Trevor Lawrence, Penix, Goff might be kind of interesting, or McCarthy. I like both of those guys a lot, but I think I'm just going to take a shot on this upside of Cam Ward. And he's also still going to hold a lot of value too. If, I want to get somebody a little bit more stable, I'll probably be able to trade him for a Jared Goff if, he's just really inconsistent, kind of up and down, and I want somebody a little bit more stable. So we're going to take him and lock up two quarterbacks.
It wouldn't surprise me at all to see Cam Ward be going in potentially the third round of startup drafts. Just, he's new, he's exciting, he's probably going 1-1. Those are things you can't fake. Those really are. So I like my team a lot. Lamar, Drake May, Garrett Wilson. I think I'm looking at wide receivers here, and I'm trying to determine in my head kind of what my team is. Should I get another wide receiver? I love some of these guys still on the board, especially Devonta Smith, Jordan Addison, DJ Moore, Zay Flowers. I feel like one of these guys might fall, and I might take the bait here, dude. I really do like Omari and Hampton, and it might be nice to get just one running back on my team. I do want to take a peek at tight end. Tyler Warren, TJ Hawkinson, I like these guys as well. But I think right now I just want to build out the bulk of my team, kind of like Andy was talking about with Bowers back in round one. We are not doing a tight end premium draft. We do play in a lot of tight end premium leagues. This specifically is not tight end premium. I think if it was, I would really, really be considering going tight end here. And I might have even considered going tight end at 3-4 potentially too, because I do really value having an elite tight end. Just like you may have gone Bowers, 1.8 tight end premium. I wouldn't be surprised to see him go 1.5, 1.6, because you're potentially getting that big of a difference maker. But I think I'm going to get a little spicy here, and I am going to take Omarion Hampton. There's some hype of him going in the first round. I think he's definitely going to at least go in the second round. And I want to get one young running back on my team. And coming back around this board, I'm not taking him, but I got to say, Christian McCaffrey being there in round 5 of a startup draft, man, things have changed so much in the last 2 years. This guy was going like 111, 112 a couple years ago, easily. And that is how quickly it can fall off for some of these elite running backs. They suffer one injury. So looking at here on my board, I'm really torn right now between potentially Chris Olave, Zay Flowers, and Jordan Addison. These guys are basically in the same tier for me. I am higher on Addison than most, but I think for me, the tiebreaker seems pretty simple. I'm just going to stack it up, baby. I love a good stack, especially in a dynasty league, and I can't pass up Lamar to Zay Flowers on my team. That's a young player still, someone who I still think is going to improve in the next couple years. So I love it. I like the way and how young my core is looking at the moment.
Yeah, I was really hoping Flowers was going to fall to me. He was going to be my next pick. Also now looking McCarthy there in this round, Goff still there, are two guys where it's, maybe that Cam Ward pick, maybe I could have benefited from taking another wide receiver just with the one that I have on the board. And looking at wideouts, there's quite a few guys I like. Team 12 yet to take a quarterback. Team 10 yet to take a quarterback. Team 9 only has one. So I feel like there's going to be a little quarterback run over here. I'm sitting good with my 2. Sometimes, it can be a good thing. Be that quarterback hog guy in a super flex. They always have great trade value. But especially for my team, taking a running back and then a wideout first and second, I want to have a team that can really compete this year. So I'm going to take another rookie. I'm going to take Travion Henderson. Really like what I've heard about him. Hope he lands in a good spot. And because it is double flex and not 3 wide receiver, it leaves me the option to draft another running back that I can still start in that flex position. But really going to be probably looking.
I know, dude. Mock drafts are so crazy because it's like there are a lot of players I like, but then you're like, how much do I actually like these guys? As I kind of start to get to it more, you're like, oh, I wish it was like T. Higgins and Rashee Rice sitting there.
Yeah. We got Tyreek Hill, which is interesting. Obviously, 31, but for a 1 or 2 year deal on your dynasty roster, you can score a lot of points. Kind of fell off a little bit at the end of last season, though, so a little concern there. Same thing with Henry. Obviously great last year, but the age is starting to be a little tough. Pickens, Metcalf. Usually I like building the core of my dynasty team with younger wide receivers. Obviously, Nico kind of being in the middle of his career, but doesn't quite hit. So
it's tough. I think DJ Moore, Addison, and Waddle would have been great players for your team.
Yeah, those are all guys I had in the queue. DK on Pittsburgh is interesting. We'll see what that does to George Pickens and what that does to him. McLaurin, great season last year. I think, oh man. Another thing to consider, there's some running backs I like here too, I have that flex spot, but I feel like wide receiver is gonna dry up a little bit sooner.
I definitely like to go. I don't think you want to wait too long. And this is more of a premise to those of you guys watching is you got to load up. You got to load up on wide receiver before they all go away.
I mean, what I would have actually loved right here, if I would have taken Rashee Rice instead of Cam Ward, if I knew I could snag JJ McCarthy at the 6.5, I would be absolutely stoked on this team and have a lot of options with where I wanted to go here. Because I feel like the gap between McCarthy and Cam Ward is not 2 full rounds. I think it's a lot closer than that.
Yes, 100%. And I think you could even argue, had you taken JJ McCarthy, I think I would have understood.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have said anything. I think I would have taken it as, oh, that's a good pick. I like it.
We're going to gamble here. We're going to take old George Pickens.
He's young. I think, you can't fake youth in Dynasty, even just for trade asset wise, right?
Yeah.
This is also where it gets a little sticky. Sometimes you do these mock drafts and, there are some things where you're like, I think the quarterbacks probably would go a little faster, but you never know. Sometimes people do draft in very interesting ways. So for me, the guys that I was looking at, I was really focused on tight end here, and I was really hoping that TJ Hawkinson would come back to me. I like having a tight end I can depend on my Dynasty teams. Maybe it stems from the fact that in my OG Dynasty League, I had Travis Kelce, and I got lucky in that sense. But to me, I just like having that stability at tight end. I think it can really win you weeks. And what it does is it really frees you up to use your bench slots and your other roster spots to not worry about tight end. And I think that's something I really value and like about it. If I was to look at other positions, I think running back's interesting. Honestly, part of me would want to go Judkins. I personally just think he would have already gone. So I'm trying to build this one a little more realistic, but he is sitting there, and there's a bunch of players that have gone. I think Judkins makes a lot of sense here with the build I'm going with. But I'm going to take my tight end. I think George Kittle is interesting too. I almost brought him up on Andy's pick if Andy is going more of a win now mode as a potential idea, or curious how Andy was thinking there. But I'm going to take TJ Hawkinson. I think he's still going to be another year removed from that injury. There goes JJ McCarthy. Love the value. Team 3. Dude, Team 3 got the QB value of all QB values. McCarthy, 5 and 6. So some wide receivers went. I wouldn't say really any of the young ones went too much. And, I brought him up last round. So I think at this point, I can't fake myself. I think Judkins right here, build a young running back, a double rookie running back core here to pair with potentially one of the best QB tandems, TJ Hawkinson and 2 good wide receivers. I'm really liking the way this team is coming together.
Yeah, I am a little bit jealous. I'm not going to lie. I'm liking the build of yours a little bit than mine. Man enough to admit it. Also agree. Interesting look at tight end here, but then something very important for drafts. Team 10, Team 11, Team 12 already taken tight ends. So, there's a chance, either Kincaid or Andrews will probably slip through. I don't see anybody taking 2. So I think I'm good to wait one more round and go with probably another wide receiver here.
I actually think there's some pretty good value picks wide receiver wise here.
Yeah.
Right? I'm looking at some of these names, and one of them really stands out to me as someone who would not be available. But we don't know. And I think there's some really good values here in round 6, round 7. While Andy thinks this kind of is one of those places that if you do play in dynasty leagues where you are able to trade down sometimes, I think this is kind of that zone where if you can trade down and pick up an extra 6th round pick, an extra 7th round pick, there's great value of some really just good players here. They may not be those elite studs, but I think there's some very good players on the board that I would love to have to fill out a deep lineup like this team.
Yeah. Obviously Mike Evans scores a lot of points. He's getting a little bit older. I did say I was win now, and now I feel like I'm kind of going back and forth between it, which is probably not the way you really want to do your drafting. You kind of want to stick to something when you go for it. But seeing Jamison Williams here, I feel like he has pretty big upside. Pretty decent year last year. So I'm going to go there. Get some speedy boys on the roster. Didn't even look at running back there. And, I might even continue to wait on tight end at this point. And I'm just going to get the perennial guy who just scores a bunch of points and touchdowns. We got a couple of young guys. Let's get Mike Evans on the squad. 31 years old. I think he's still got another couple good seasons left in him. In the 8th round, I like him filling out my roster here.
Yeah, looking here, I mean, I think there's some interesting picks this round. I think Jalen McMillan, Jaden Reed are, dude, they may be two of the toughest guys to value and rank in dynasty leagues. Like, I personally think there's a possibility Jaden Reed is ranked 20 picks too low, and then I think there's a possibility that he's ranked 20 picks too high. And
Yeah.
I like, honestly, he's so tough to read. It's like, I think he's such a great player, and I think I would personally take a shot on him, but I can't really fault someone for taking Jerry Jeudy, Jameson Williams before him, because they just have more solidified roles, I think, moving forward. So since I was able to get Hampton and Judkins as my backfield here and get TJ Hawkinson, dude, it's wide receiver time. I wish I had a blinking light that was just, it's wide receiver time, because now it's time to just load up the staple. A guy we spoke about last video, a guy that was on the cover of last video, Ricky Pearsall. I'm putting him on the team. I would love to have this guy as my wide receiver 3-4 in a dynasty league. Also, the guy that I was talking about, I think Travis Hunter. I think Travis Hunter is tough. If he comes out and he's playing wide receiver, he's going to go in round 4. And if he comes out and he's playing corner, he may not get drafted till round 12. So I don't really know. He's such a tough one. That's why you mostly do mocks and rookie drafts after the NFL draft if you're doing an actual startup draft.
Yeah.
But right now, man, it's fun. We are here to give you guys content because I myself watch mock drafts. I understand why you would turn one on. It's fun. You're bored. You're sitting at home. You're sitting at work. You need something to do. So coming back around, I just took Ricky Pearsall. I do think there's a couple of interesting players here on the board. Now, in my mind, two things are kind of clear for me here is, do I want someone for my starting lineup? Or do I want someone who I think may be the most valuable asset left on the board that I can either trade to a different team for future draft capital, trade to someone halfway through the season? And to me, that is kind of how I like to think about certain teams, especially once you start kind of filling your lineup out, is how can I get not only the best team, but I almost want to get the most valuable team because it gives me the most pieces to play around with almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
And someone here that I think is really interesting to me that I do think in this situation at 9-4, I'm willing to take a shot on, and that's going to be Shedeur Sanders. I think it's pretty good value for someone who could potentially and probably is going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. I don't like to risk it in rounds 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, kind of how I was speaking. But at this point, I don't think you're really risking it. And if you take Shedeur round 8, round 9 in your startup, and then he does go top 10, I think you got a screaming deal on this player. And if he goes late first, I think you got just a pretty accurate price. So I'm going to go Shedeur. I don't mind getting a third quarterback, whether it's to trade, use, or let kind of just grow in value on my bench.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I usually like getting 3 quarterbacks in Superflex around this time. I'm seeing Sam Darnold there. Justin Fields, a little bit intriguing. Obviously, old Matthew Stafford still standing there. I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten path. I am going to go back to wide receiver here. And, we've got a couple of young bucks. We've got a guy right in the prime. We got an old guy. We're going to get one more old man. We're going to go Devontae Adams. I think immediately he's going to be starting over George Pickens and Jameson Williams this year in my lineup. I have those guys as, I think, great future pieces. So my team's not just all, older win now. But I think here in the 9th, because I want to try and win this year, he's going to be a really good wide receiver this year.
100%. once you take a running back in the first round of a super flex startup, you are crazy to not try and win. You got a 3-year window with Bijan Robinson on your team now. And I love the pick, especially I think you got a couple young guys. I like Nico in the prime. I think Travion's interesting. And, Adams and Evans are going to be starting players for your team this season and potentially next year. And, it wouldn't surprise me at all if with your receiver core, if you have 3 top 20 guys with Nico, Evans, and Adams for the 2025 season.
And then, all right, we put off tight end for a long time, really hoping to get either Kraft or Njoku or Pitts after I took Mike Evans there. Once again, going back, would have taken one of those guys potentially instead of him. So I'm already learning a lot about if I was in this 8 spot, how I would do this draft differently. So this has been a great learning tool. I'm okay with how my team's turning out, but I'm definitely not loving it and think I could have done a much better job. I feel like what I'm going to do is I'm going to wind up doubling up on tight end. I'm going to take Isaiah Likely here, the young guy who's got some potential, and we'll see if he makes it back to me for the next round, who's probably going to be my starter next year.
Yeah, I mean, I love Isaiah Likely, man. I talked about him earlier. I think if you're going late tight end, I think Isaiah Likely is the perfect guy to pair up with someone more like looking on the board here. You go Isaiah Likely, just like you said, and then coming into this season, maybe an Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram, can you get even, dude? I wouldn't even hate this. I don't think I would reach on him, but if he falls to you in a couple rounds, Travis Kelce. Like, can you get just a year of Travis Kelce and then maybe Ingram takes over for Andrews 2 years from now or something?
Yeah.
I think that's a very interesting and unique way to potentially build your team. So, looking at my roster, it's very balanced, which is something I like. I've got a couple running backs. I've got 3 wide receivers. I got a tight end. I've got 3 quarterbacks, which I absolutely love. So I'm going to go back to wide receiver and running back. I'm going to go to just the flex ranks here, which kind of just going to combine everyone, just kind of page down, see if there's any values I'm missing. Something I like to do in mock drafts is, dude, every once in a while, take a deep breath, page through the rankings, see if there's someone that was just completely misranked and see if other people have been missing them. I don't see anyone really too crazy that's standing out too much. So at this point, I like some of these running backs. I don't really love them, and I don't really think they're worth reaching. So at that point, that means the value is in the wide receiver room. Now, staring me immediately in the face are some of these rookies. And I think we've taken a lot of rookies. And I love rookies, especially in startup drafts. They can grow in value. Just for this exercise, I'm going to skip taking Matthew Golden. I just don't think I'm really going to learn much from that. And I also don't think those of you viewing are going to learn much, because I think it would be more valuable to see, if you're looking at a weird, strange board, who are the guys I'm kind of looking at here that I would target. And I think someone for me that is intriguing, and someone who I did actually think had a pretty good offseason, even though he kind of was quote unquote shit talked all last year. Deebo Samuel, man, I think the Washington landing spot is a good spot for Deebo Samuel. Deebo is a tough one. I understand why you wouldn't want to trade for Deebo Samuel, but I think the value here, I do think Deebo could return pretty good value just on this 10-9 landing spot. It's going to be a contract year for him. If he has a good year, wouldn't be surprised if he gets 2 to 3 more years of fantasy relevance. Now, looking at some of these other positions, honestly, part of me wants to just go QB4. I love just stacking quarterbacks so much, but I think I'm going to play this startup a little more balanced, which just allows me to kind of pivot. I'm not as win now as Andy's team is per se, but I think there's a world if Hampton and Judkins hit that this is a semifinal playoff team right now. I mean, I've got Lamar who can just absolutely go off at any point. So I think when you have elite players like that, I absolutely love it. So looking at the running back room here, Trey Benson's interesting. He's so tough, man. I think last year I would have loved the value I was getting on Trey Benson if I took him right here. I'm just scared enough, I think, with the extension that they gave James Conner, that it may just be another year or two for Trey Benson. And at that point, is he just a little too old? And is he not really worth it at that point to really pick up? So I'm going to go with someone who actually had a pretty good year last year. I think he was the starter for the team. I think their offensive line got fixed this offseason. That's going to be Tony Pollard. I think Tony Pollard, similar to Deebo Samuel, these are just solid bets that kind of, 4 to 5 weeks into the season, let's say I'm sitting at 4-1, I play them, I hold on to them. Let's say it turns out the season is not going my way. I think they're going to be starters, and I could move them for some future draft picks to an Andy, maybe who needs a little boost. Maybe he has an injury. Maybe someone's team hits a little more.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Also, Travis Kelce, Jonnu Smith going right before me. Trey Benson was somebody I was looking at. Like you said, James Conner signed that extension. He stayed really healthy last year for, I think it's the healthiest he's pretty much been his entire career. And, I liked some of what I saw out of Trey Benson. So, I'm looking at this team. I definitely need another running back. I mean, just as a backup to supplement these guys, I'm starting Bijan and Travion probably every single week. I can't imagine a scenario where I don't unless they're injured or they're on bye. But I think this is the time I'm going to go ahead and snag my third quarterback. I'm going upside here. I'm going to take Justin Fields. It's tough that he's on the Jets, but his rushing upside, when he gets it going, he's put up elite fantasy numbers before, which is something I like to see. Sam Darnold, kind of intriguing. Don't know enough about these rookies for me to really talk about them. But also Seattle, kind of vacating their wide receiver room besides JSN is also a little concerning. He's no longer throwing to one of the best wide receiver cores in the league. So we'll see how that winds up. But
I think Justin Fields is a great target for a win now dynasty team, whether it's a trade target for you to go acquire if you're looking to bolster kind of just your QB room, 2-year deal, could be a 1-year deal eventually. But we don't doubt Fields' ability to be productive fantasy-wise when he's on the field. What we doubt is his ability to keep an NFL job.
Yeah.
So I think in the short term, I think Justin Fields is a fine guy to go add. It really does just depend on price. And round 11, dude, honestly, once you kind of get to double-digit rounds, man, you can kind of shoot from the hip, I think, a little more than I would suggest earlier in drafts.
Yeah, and here looking at my board, at this point, I definitely need another running back. This is a guy we also talked about last week. Ollie Gordon is interesting. I don't know much about him. So, he's somebody where if we were to do this draft a month from now, I might be all over Ollie Gordon here, but I'm going to go Tank Bigsby. His ability to get more of that share of that job, having the goal line work in Jacksonville. And, them spending big draft capital just recently on, why am I blanking on the name right now? But help me out. ETN. I feel like they're probably not going to go running back early. They have that kind of two-headed committee. So I feel like hopefully his job is going to be safe from the NFL draft. And he's my fill-in guy.
Yeah, I like Bigsby, man. I was really actually between Pollard, Spears, and Bigsby at 11-4 on my last pick. And I honestly view those three guys fairly similarly. I think it kind of just depends on what you're looking for. And I think with this Bigsby, he could be a starter for you. And like Andy's been saying, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him take potentially 2 to 3 more running backs in his next probably 5 picks. Is if you're trying to win, you need a stable of running backs.
Yeah.
A deep stable of running backs.
The horses.
So I am constantly kind of looking at the running back situation. I think for my team right now, I feel pretty good with 3 of them. I really haven't committed to winning this year. I think I'm just trying to build value. I like some of these running backs. I think Jaylen Warren is interesting. I think the rookies are probably where I would lean if I went running back. Similar to last round, I think I'm going to stay away from rookies for a couple rounds, try to pick some more veteran players. So that's going to push me over to potentially wide receiver and tight end. And I think I'm in a very interesting conundrum here. I think there are three players I'm trying to deciding between. I think Tank Dell is tough. Like, part of me thinks Tank Dell doesn't play another meaningful snap in the rest of his NFL career. And then part of me thinks that a year from now, Tank Dell comes back, not this season, but next season. And, maybe he does return value and he gets some sort of hometown deal that probably doesn't cost much, but I think it's a little too much risk for me. Next player is going to be Jawan Jennings. I think Jennings is a very good value here. And I do have Ricky Pearsall, but I think I'm just going to lock up that wide receiver room minus Brandon Ayuk until he comes back and just see which one of these guys really becomes the go-to guy for Purdy. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Pearsall or Jennings be a top 24 wide receiver easily before Brandon Ayuk gets back, because especially Jennings showed it last year that he has the upside to do so. And Pearsall had a couple spike games. We'll see. So really just continuing here, I think this is a good time for me to kind of go back to the tight end position. I do have TJ Hawkinson, but I like to kind of build out a deep tight end room. The guy that's kind of looking for me right here is a guy on Carolina, and I'm just going to take him, and that's going to be Jatavian Sanders. I think he has the upside. I like getting a couple tight ends, whether it's to trade them or potentially start them. If I have to flex them in a pinch, so be it. I'm not building my team to do so. But I like kind of the age of my team right now. I've got a couple of vets, but kind of just building a young core for my team.
Yeah. And I think usually when doing dynasty startups, that's the way I like to do it, is to build a young core. Like I've said a couple times, if I were to restart this, I don't know if I would build my team the way I have. We tried the experiment. And, I feel like I'm learning a lot going into, dynasty startup, dynasty rookie season. Looking at my board here, I know I need running backs. Jalen Wright is a little intriguing, Braylon Allen Flash, but obviously they still have Brees. Cam Scattaboo, I love the name. We'll see, where he lands in the NFL, what round he goes. I know he's projected a little bit later. But for me, another guy that we talked about last week, Cedric Tillman. That's who I'm going to go with. This is probably the last wide receiver that I'm going to be taking. This is my sixth guy. Love his potential. Feel like if he kind of picks up where, even close to where he left off, he's going to be great at the end of the 13th round. Somebody who I can either consider trading if I feel like I need another running back or to upgrade tight end, or just to have, depth at wide receiver for future value. So.
Yeah, dude, Scattaboo's going to be fun, man. I would employ you to look up some Scattaboo tape, and I think he will slowly become one of your favorite players. He is just a bruising white running back who runs over people. So Peyton Hillis type, one could say, but better. But also we love Peyton Hillis. He made the cover of Madden. So we'll see if Scattaboo ever gets there.
Also, this is wild. Sam Darnold still sitting on the board, ADP 89. So, when you're in a computer mock draft, when you still have some of these quarterbacks here, not going. Matthew Stafford still on the board. These guys should be long gone. Guys that I would have drafted a couple of rounds ago, probably.
I probably just would have went QB.
Bump.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we'll get a little stack here. My tight end with Isaiah Likely, like him for the future, but I definitely need more bodies in that room. This is your boy. We're going to go get Chiggy with it in the 14th round.
I think that's the perfect pick, man. That's a high upside tight end pick, which is what you kind of want to do, is can you just build a stable of upside tight ends and see which one hits? Kind of going off what Andy said, though, sometimes when you do these computer mock drafts, as it gets later, some of these players hang around. So, if you guys subscribe, comment, follow us on Twitter, maybe we can kind of get a group together and get some listeners in here to do some of these mocks. I'd love to do a real-time mock with some people. I think that'd be so fun. And definitely something I'd be interested in doing. So shoot me a comment if you're interested, man. I'd be happy to shoot me a comment, maybe shoot me an email even. It's attached on the channel. I'll put you in a little folder and I'll send it out and we'll try to get some mock drafts going for the channel. But we're in round 14, sitting here at 14-9. We're doing a 19-round mock draft. At this point, it's just upside. It's all I care about. I think I'm going to go back to running back just to kind of round out and have a pretty even balance of wide receivers and running backs. And I think a guy who has a little upside, I personally think he had a good offseason, and I think this move could end up being good for him as he's behind someone similar to James Conner, who does usually miss some games. And I'm going to take Jordan Mason here. I think Jordan Mason going to the Vikings this offseason just as kind of a spell back for Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones had a pretty bad goal red zone rushing statistics last season. Wouldn't be surprised to see Jordan Mason get some touchdowns, and definitely an upside handcuff as well. Circling back around, though, looking at some of these wideouts, and there are actually a couple names that I'm surprised to still see here. And this is exactly what I'm saying, where, dude, scroll down these ranks and you would be surprised. I think one that's just going kind of undervalued potentially, and he could be nothing, kind of Tank Dell-like, but he could be something. And I'm going to go Christian Watson, still on the board. Christian Watson on Sleeper. If you guys do startup drafts on Sleeper, make sure to put Christian Watson in your mind to take late, because I just assumed he'd kind of already been drafted. He usually would probably go sooner than this in any sort of thing. But, I guess Watson, Dobbs kind of next to each other. Watson with the injury now, it's not the craziest idea. I think Hollywood Brown is pretty good value there too at 15-2 as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of these guys that you're getting this late in the drafts, you see a lot of rookies that are probably going to be like late second, third round rookies going. And then there's some of these veterans that, still have a lot of value to either fill in weeks or, some younger guys who haven't really broken out, who knows. Tyler Algier was a guy I was really looking at to back up my Bijan. In case he got hurt. I think, there's a few guys where it'd be great to get the handcuffs. Obviously, Algier still mixes in a little bit, so he has a little bit of standalone value. But then if Bijan goes down, I think he's going to be very valuable for fantasy. I'm going to stick with running back, and I'm going to go a guy who drafted in the third round. I think he was the third or fourth running back drafted last year. Real fast, didn't play a single snap because of a whole bunch of injuries, appendicitis, and that is Marshawn Lloyd. Obviously, Josh Jacobs, the starter, the bell cow, got a lot of touches last year, but usually LaFleur likes to run two backs. I think he's healthy. Lloyd is going to get in there, and look at that running back run.
Oh, wow. That's a bunch of guys. That's some names right there.
Yeah, those are guys. So I'm glad I jumped on the train before all that happened. So here we are. We got 4 running backs on the roster. I definitely want some more, but after that big run, there's a few somewhat interesting names, but I have a feeling that a lot of those guys are going to be there. Look at a tight end, Theo Johnson, slightly intriguing. Hunter Arroyo, don't know a whole lot about. Noah Gray. I feel like, where I might go here, if I was looking at wide receiver, I think Dontavian Wicks is a great value here. I mean, he and Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed are going to be the 3 Packers wide receivers to start the year. Jaden Reed goes way earlier, and then it looks like Watson, Doubs, and Wicks this late in the game. I feel like all of them have a chance to be very contributing for fantasy, at least in a flex. Not saying any one of those 3 is going to break out and be a stud on your team. I think Wicks has the best chance to be that guy, unless Watson can come back from his injury really well. But I think I'm going to go with the starting tight end for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm going to take Brenton Strange based on how my tight end room is looking. This might be a little bit of a reach here, but when I took Likely earlier, I knew that I was going to need to fill a number of, spots on my bench with tight ends to be able to play the hot hand, play matchups, and figure this thing out.
Yeah, I think getting Strange there is a smart choice. I do still think you need another body there, especially if you're going win now. You got to be careful too, because you do still want to have a competent tight end room. You may not have to have that elite number one kind of tight end, but you need to piece together a roster here. It's starting to get nasty out in these streets on this draft board, man. It's getting deep, and I love it. This is where, honestly, you can potentially make some dynasty draft picks that can really help your team out in the future. I mean, I'm just scrolling down here, and I'm seeing a bunch of rookies that I would personally, for me, hop on the train of. I'm going to go look at running back real quick, too. There is just no one. And there's a guy that actually stands out here, and I think I'm going to take him just kind of as an upside handcuff play, and that's going to be Will Shipley. Probably going to be the spell to Saquon Barkley this year. Looked pretty good when he got a shot last season, and so love to see the quarterbacks finally going. I don't know why it took this long. So I'm just going to let the computer take those guys. Well, I've been avoiding rookies. I've been being polite. But I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to get a guy who I think could surprise people on how high he goes in the NFL draft. It's going to be Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. I don't know if there's any Devi C2C players watching along. Got him on my C2C team. You'll love to see it. I think Jaden Higgins is a very good wide receiver, and I'm curious and excited to see how high he goes in the NFL draft.
Yeah. This running back room here. I want another running back, but I don't think I want any of these running backs. So I don't know a whole lot about, especially the rookies at this level. So you know what? I said I probably wasn't going to go another wide receiver, but I'm going to add Dontavian Wicks. I like the upside. I like the opportunity.
I guess round 17 is sleeper kicking it into gear with the quarterbacks.
You got to take quarterbacks. And some more wide receivers go. Well, here we are.
I do think there's a running back then. I'm just going to bring this up. Andy can think, and maybe this is an idea for him, but someone who I think actually wouldn't be the worst pick for the way he's built his team, and maybe Kareem Hunt.
That's literally what I was about to say. 29 years old, back in his old team.
I think he was productive down the stretch for KC last year, and they did re-sign him. No guarantees, obviously, but
yeah, but they obviously trust him. He doesn't have the same juice he had earlier in his career, but still fairly solid with the football. Like you said, they trust him. He knows the system, and looking at all these other names, I think he's the guy that at least has the most flex value. And we'll see if Kansas City wants to add another running back in the draft. But in the meantime, this is round 18. So we're going to put him on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, it's just getting ugly. It's getting really ugly. And also some of my favorite players, though, because they are just so gross that I kind of like adding some of these players. For me, someone I'm really hoping just to do it to him. I really hope Aaron Rodgers is still there in the 19th round just so I can take him. I kind of want to take him just to do it. Looking at some other dart throws, though, just for you guys watching. First off, if you made it this far and you aren't subscribed, it means you're meant for the channel. We are 54 minutes into the mock draft. If you are here for this whole video, please comment. I will gladly help you personally on any trade in your league. You just shoot me a comment. I will respond right away. If you made it 54 minutes into this video, you let me know, and you are my hero. So I'm just going to throw out a couple names for guys that are at least intriguing enough to me that I think should go in this range. It doesn't mean I'm going to draft them this second. I'm just going to quickly toss out a couple names that I think are interesting late round flyers. And then I will land on the guy who I'm going to take, who I think is actually a realistic pick. I think Aaron Rodgers would be gone by now.
Yeah.
At running back, some guys I find interesting. Isaiah Davis. I think that's an interesting one. Up there for the Jets, we don't really know how that running back room's going to play out with the new coach. I think he's interesting. I think there are definitely some interesting wide receivers still on the board. I really wouldn't mind taking a shot at an Adam Thielen just for the potential value for this season. Parker Washington, another guy I spoke about in a stash video. I like Parker Washington here. I think Jalen Tolbert as well is an interesting and pretty good value pick here. He showed a little bit down the season. D-Hop, I don't think he's anything special, but he did sign with the Ravens. Maybe he can have a high touchdown season. Javon Baker is interesting as well. Over at tight end going down, I think Dalton Schultz, honestly, is pretty good value now. He's still the starter. Yeah. I mean, I realize he hasn't been killing it, but he still is the starter there in Houston. But what I'm going to land on, and I think this is a great late round pick in Dynasty, because I personally believe the question is not if this guy will get benched, but when he gets benched. That answer is Anthony Richardson. So I'm taking my boy Danny Dimes, dude. I personally think Daniel Jones starts games for Indianapolis this season. I really do believe it's a when, not if, for Anthony Richardson getting benched this year. And I want to have Daniel Jones when it happens, because number one, you can either quickly just trade him to the Anthony Richardson owner and just get an immediate second round pick or something. Or maybe, just maybe, Daniel Jones is this year's Sam Darnold, the previous year's Baker Mayfield, and the previous year's Geno Smith. Maybe it is Danny Dimes, and I will be the one laughing, finally, at everyone. But, going back on some of these other players, I did mention some guys, and I think I'm just going to get a little more depth here in my wide receiver room, just because I liked a couple of these names, and I do think there's a little value. I'm just going to go with the potential stack here. It's late, and it's a dirty stack, and it's really, honestly, kind of disgusting. But I'm going to go Javon Baker. I think he's a great dart throw at the end of the draft. New coaching regime, maybe they give him a chance. Aaron Rodgers goes at 19-6. Such a bummer. What a value. Good for this guy that went Stafford, Howard, Rodgers to finish the draft off. Hurts and love. I love to see it.
Wow. Yeah. Well, Matt Stafford, a guy that he's definitely not going to be anywhere close to there. Oh boy. Last round of our draft, you're looking at a lot of these names, and, like you said, at this point, it's all dart throws. So I'm looking at some young guys. I don't hate just, if you have the principle of once I hit round 20, I'm just going to start taking rookies, because you never know. I kind of like that principle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a guy for vibes. I think he has a chance of getting in some games this year. He is one of my favorite players in the NFL, and that is going to be Jameis Winston.
Oh, I love it. I love a vibe pick. And similar to Daniel Jones, if they do not draft a quarterback, and that's going to be the Giants, if the Giants don't draft a quarterback, it is similar to what I was saying with Danny Dimes. I think it's when, not if, Russ gets benched. I don't know. I mean, unless he comes out and just lights it on fire because of Malik Neighbors. So, Andy, looking at kind of this draft, let's take our two teams out of the conversation. So we're sitting here with my team. I'm going to run through my team real quick. Then you're going to run through your team. While I run through my team, I want you to look at some of these other teams and pick one out that you really like and think that, I guess in this situation, the computer did a good job drafting, but you would definitely take that team. So I'm going to run down my team real quick here. Lamar, Drake May, Garrett Wilson, Omarion Hampton, Zay Flowers, TJ Hawkinson, Kushan Judkins, Pearsall, Shador Sanders, Debo Samuel, Tony Pollard, Jennings, Jatavian Sanders, Jordan Mason, Christian Watson, potentially the value pick of the draft there at 15-4.
Yeah.
16-9, we got Shipley, Jaden Higgins at 17-4, my boy Danny Dimes, and then Javon Baker to finish it off. And Andy, do you want to give us a rundown real quick of who you went and in order for us?
Sure. We started off, we have Bijan Robinson, or do you want me to do order of how I drafted them, or do you want to do roster order?
Whichever one you're looking at, totally works.
All right, we'll do roster order. I think that makes the most sense. We got Kyler Murray and Cam Ward and Fields at quarterback. We got Bijan Robinson, Travion Henderson, starting running backs getting backed up by Tank Bigsby, Marshawn Lloyd, and Kareem Hunt. Then at wide receiver, Nico Collins, George Pickens, Jamison Williams, Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, Cedric Tillman, and Dontavian Wicks. Then at tight end, the rotating door of Isaiah Likely, Chigo Kwanko, and Brenton Strange. Hopefully somebody hits. And yeah, looking back at this draft, I definitely don't think it is the best draft I've ever done. We'll see where this team goes. Hopefully we can get it done early in year one. Hopefully Cam Ward hits, Henderson hits. A little risk can be a little risky going rookies early, especially if you are trying to win year one. So I feel like I kind of went back a little bit on my super trying to win right now. So not my favorite team I've drafted, but there's a lot of players that I like here. And, I think it'll definitely be a very competitive team the first year with some nice younger guys. I think that will still hold value for years to come.
And to keep in mind, like you said, man, I mean, you don't always have to draft for it to be your starting lineup. There's nothing that says you can't trade Cam Ward and Travion Henderson this offseason and get some more veteran players or guys that you would rather trust. But Andy, while you were looking around, give me the name of a team you kind of were taking a peek at that you liked their build and what you liked about it.
I mean, I feel like team one is kind of interesting, going very late on running back. Tyrone Tracy in the 9th and Stevenson, Warren. So just kind of going at the end of the draft, they went full committee, which is an approach I don't hate in Dynasty. I usually like to get at least one guy that I like, in the first 6 or 7 rounds. But, definitely it looks like a team with Harrison and Worthy and Smith and Burden, and then going quarterback that is going to be built for the future, and Tucker Kraft at tight end, where it's, maybe they can get it done if, some of these running backs have good seasons. If some of these teams don't draft a guy high, they can compete now, but I think they've got just a lot of value moving forward. So I don't mind building a team like that and then trying to accumulate running backs, either through next year's draft, through some trades. But, usually it's wide receivers and quarterbacks that really hold value in Dynasty. So it's like a safe way to construct a team.
I mean, also, dude, it's really hard to hate your team when you got Josh Allen, when you got Jaden Daniels, when you get Lamar Jackson. These teams just look so pretty because you get this single elite quarterback asset. So I want to highlight 2 teams. I think team 3, I actually really like, and they really waited on quarterback, but I think they just really benefited from some of these teams not going quarterback. Jamar Chase, Trey McBride, Drake London, Roma Dunze, Penix McCarthy, Tyreek Hill. And then I actually think they did a pretty good job with these next 3 picks, building out a potential RB core, at least in a sketchy way. David Montgomery, Travis Etienne, and Najee Harris. I wouldn't be surprised if you could start 2 of those guys and not feel terrible about it.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting team. And then I think I really do like 2, I think over here, team 11, Mahomes, CeeDee Lamb, Kyron Baker, DJ Moore, Warren at tight end. I think Kamara is a great value. And then going down to their kind of receiver core, McMillan, Downs, Coleman, Cup, that's a deep team. And I mean, being able to start Mahomes, CeeDee Lamb, that's a strong start.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that.
Overall, I mean, love me a good mock draft. I'm going to move it back to this. Thank you guys for tuning in for the mock draft episode. It was a haul. I really appreciate you guys. Feel free to watch it on ×2. I got to say, I watch videos on ×2 all the time. I guess I probably should have dropped that advice at the beginning of the video. It really means nothing to you. But as always, subscribe, like the video. Thank you guys for tuning in. Comment anything you want. Andy, thanks for joining me, man. And
thanks for having me. And feel free to roast this team if you think it's not good, too. I'd love to hear some feedback. So
yeah, if you made it this far, tell us your favorite team and why it was mine. Thank you guys for joining. We'll catch you later.